5 prophets have already warned us about what happens immediately before the total collapse of the light system. 5 prophets, living in different eras, separated by centuries, having never known one another, have left us with the exact same blueprint. They have provided the precise warning of what will manifest on the global stage right before the 3 days of darkness begin. They are not speaking of vague rumors or baseless theories. They are not offering maybe scenarios that can be changed by human will. They have given us specific signs, 3 trigger events, 3 life and death warnings, and 3 traits of those who will endure. Event number 1. The sky's final caution. Now, here is the first thing the prophets say about life inside the final countdown. There shall be a tribulation so great, a crisis so profound, that it has not been matched since the beginning of the world until this time. No, nor ever shall be again. This event is described as worse than the Great Flood, the catastrophe that wiped out every living thing on the face of the earth except for 8 souls and the animals within the ark. It is worse than the 10 Egyptian plagues, those supernatural judgments that systematically dismantled the most powerful empire of the ancient world. It is worse than the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD, when the temple was razed to the ground and over 1 million people perished in a single siege. The prophets declare, it is worse than all of it, past, present, and future. Nothing before this moment matches the intensity. Nothing after it will ever compare. And here is the sentence that should haunt every person watching this video. Except those days should be shortened. No flesh should be saved. Notice the detail. Jesus and the prophets are describing extinction-level conditions. No flesh. Not no nation, not no city, not no army, no flesh. Without divine intervention, without the Creator specifically stepping into the timeline to limit the duration of this darkness, the combination of environmental collapse and supernatural judgment produces a condition so catastrophic that humanity would simply cease to exist. The system does not just oppress, it annihilates. Left unchecked, it kills everything that breathes. But for the elect's sake, for the sake of the faithful who have prepared, those days shall be shortened. This is the hope buried deep within the horror. Because the duration is limited, God intervenes. God sets the boundary. The 3 days of darkness is not an infinite void. It has a wall. It has a perimeter established by the sovereign hand of God for one reason: the elect. The believers who are standing firm, the ones who refuse the mark, refuse the compliance, and refuse to bow to the image. The darkness is not permanent. The hunger is not forever. The shadows have a boundary, and that boundary is set by God. But the sudden shifting of the heavens is only the first event described by the 5 prophets. The second event is what makes survival almost impossible for the unprepared. Because this event does not just attack your physical body, it attacks the very core of your mind. Event number 2. The darkness is not just a physical event. It is a spiritual trap. 5 prophets warned us that the darkness doesn't just arrive. It is preceded by a wave of deception so sophisticated that even the most grounded believers will find their foundations shaking. Event number 2: the multiplication of false deliverers. Now, here is what the prophets saw happening in the final moments before the lights go out. Because the system does not just persecute your body, it attempts to hijack your soul. It exploits the very desperation that the global crisis creates. The prophets saw a world paralyzed by fear, a world where the sky is failing and the ground is shifting, and into that vacuum of terror they arrive. False Christs, false prophets, not one, but many. This is the detail you cannot afford to overlook. The plurality. Why does the plurality matter? Because the 5 prophets warned that the beast system and the approaching 3 days of darkness create the perfect laboratory for counterfeit miracles. The hunger produces vulnerability. The isolation produces a deep, aching need for a savior. The fear of what is coming in the sky produces a willingness to believe anyone who promises safety. When people are starving, when people are terrified of the shadows, they become the perfect audience for anyone who can perform a sign. Lo, here is the Christ. Behold, he is in the desert. Look, he is in the secret chambers. The prophets warned that these are not just men with clever words. These are entities performing real signs and wonders. They will show great wonders, so convincing that if it were possible, they would deceive the very elect. This is not a simple lie. It is a strong delusion. It is a psychological and spiritual weapon designed to make you trade your eternal inheritance for a moment of physical relief. The prophets warned that the deception is designed to mirror the truth. It looks like a miracle. It feels like an answer to prayer. It sounds like deliverance. But it is a snare. And here is the warning that all 5 prophets emphasized. Do not go forth. Do not believe it. If they say he is in a hidden place, stay where you are. If they say the solution is found in a new global alliance, do not listen. The true light does not operate in secret chambers or hidden deserts. The true light does not require a digital authentication to be seen. The deception is the second event that tests the heart before the 3 days of darkness begins. It is the filter. It separates those who love the truth from those who simply love survival. The prophets saw that those who were deceived were those who had already rejected the truth in the light of day. The deception you face in the coming darkness is the consequence of the decisions you are making right now. The false prophets will offer you bread, but it is bread laced with compliance. They will offer you peace, but it is a peace that requires you to deny the Creator. This multiplication of false deliverers is the final test of your spiritual discernment. But while the false signs multiply on the ground, a different kind of sign is gathering in the cosmos. A sign that cannot be faked. A sign that ends the system entirely. Event number 3 is the one the world is not prepared to witness. Event number 3. Now, here is the event that terminates the counterfeit narrative. 5 prophets warned that before the absolute darkness settles for 3 days, the physical universe will undergo a total rebellion against the laws of physics. Because the system does not collapse from internal failure, it does not dissolve through popular uprising, and it does not fade through institutional decay. It is ended by an external power at a moment that every human being on earth witnesses simultaneously. Matthew 24:29-30 describes this sequence with terrifying precision. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. Think about the scale of this warning. The sun dark, not a solar eclipse that lasts for minutes and follows a predictable path. This is a supernatural shutdown. The moon dark, not a lunar phase, but a total withdrawal of light. The prophets warned that this is the moment the beast system realizes its absolute limitation. The system controlled the economy. It told you who could buy, who could sell, who could eat, and who would starve. It ruled through scanners, digital marks, and total surveillance. But the system discovers, in one horrific moment, that the creator of the sun does not submit to scanners. The king of the stars does not require a digital ID to manifest his power. The cosmos itself announces the return of the original, and then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, visible, global, unmistakable. This is the opposite of the false deliverers hiding in secret chambers. The true sign is not a rumor on a screen. It is not a broadcast you can choose to ignore. It is like lightning that illuminates the entire sky from east to west in a single, reality-shattering second. The contrast is absolute. The false Christs operate in the dark, in hidden places, in the deserts. The true King arrives in the most visible event in human history. And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn. Why do they mourn? Because the illusion of the system is broken. The system promised security, but it cannot stop the stars from falling. The system promised a new world order, but the original architect has arrived to reclaim the building. The prophets saw every nation, every people, every language, seeing the Son of Man coming in the clouds with power and great glory. The image of the beast demanded worship, but now the original appears. The counterfeit dissolves in the presence of the true light. The scanners go dark. The surveillance fails. The image falls. The prophets warned us. When the sky begins to roll back like a scroll, the time for choosing is over. The sign has arrived, marking the final seconds before the absolute 3-day silence begins. This cosmic collapse is the final siren. It is the universe itself screaming that the time of grace is closing. The prophets saw that the darkness isn't just an absence of light. It is a spiritual presence that follows the rejection of the true sign. But while the sky is falling, the prophets describe a different event happening on the ground. An event involving the gathering of a specific group of people. Event number 3, warning number 1. This is the instruction that 5 prophets considered the most vital because they repeated it with a sense of desperate urgency. The primary danger is not what is happening in the sky. It is what is happening in your ears. Before the first second of the 3 days of darkness begins, there will be a period of unnatural, haunting silence. But the prophets warned that this silence is a trap. Warning number 1. Do not be deceived by the peace and safety narrative. Because the system does not simply go dark, it prepares your mind to accept a false light. 5 prophets described a moment where the world's leaders and the false deliverers will announce that the crisis is over. They will say the cosmic shift has been managed. They will claim the beast system has brought order to the chaos of the falling stars. And here is the detail most people miss. The deception is the final filter. Matthew 24:4 warns us as the very first instruction. Take heed that no man deceive you. Not take heed of the famine, not take heed of the marks, but take heed of the deception. Why? Because the prophets saw that the system's response to the approaching darkness is total. Then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. This is the internal fracture the 5 prophets feared most. They saw that the pressure of the coming darkness produces a spiritual rot inside the community. It is the handover. It is the betrayal from within. The prophets are not describing an anonymous arrest by a global police force. They are describing a personal, intimate betrayal. A deliberate handover by someone who knows your identity, your location, and your refusal to comply with the New World Protocol. Delivered up by a neighbor who saw you preparing your candles. By a former friend who took the mark and now resents the fact that you did not. By a family member who has decided that the cost of associating with a refuser is too high for their own survival. This is the psychological warfare that precedes the 3 days of darkness. The prophets warned that the system does not operate through chaos. It operates through a terrifying digital order. It uses fear to turn every citizen into an informant, hated of all nations, not some nations, all. The 5 prophets saw that as the darkness approaches, there will be no border that protects you, no embassy that intervenes, and no geographic refuge that the system cannot reach. The hatred for those who hold to the true light becomes universal because the system itself is universal. Many shall be offended. They will be scandalized by your faith. They will see your refusal to bow as the reason the world is falling apart. And here is the detail that should concern every person watching this. The betrayal comes from the kitchen table. It comes from the church pews. Not every bond survives the pressure of starvation and the fear of detection. The ones who break, those who trade the truth for a temporary seat at the system's table, become the system's most effective weapons. They know your hiding places. They know your barter networks. They know your prayer schedules. And they deliver that knowledge to the authorities in exchange for a moment of peace. Warning number 1 is about the hardening of the heart. The prophets warned that if you do not love the truth now, while the lights are still on, you will be unable to hear the truth when the silence begins. The deception isn't just a lie you hear. It is a delusion you live. But the story does not end with the betrayal. Because the prophets saw what happens to those who are delivered up. They saw the souls under the altar. They saw that the cost is physical, but the reward is eternal. But the persecution warning is only the first layer. The second warning is the one that determines whether you even make it to the door. Warning number 2. But the betrayal warning is just the first layer of the storm. 5 prophets warned that as the countdown to the 3 days of darkness reaches its final hours, the persecution will transition from social pressure to institutional machinery. Warning number 2. The response of the system will be total. Because the beast system does not operate through random chaos. It operates through a terrifying, lethal order. When the lights begin to flicker and the cosmic signs appear, the system will not panic. It will activate. Matthew 24:9-10 reveals the institutional nature of this period. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you. And ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. The prophets emphasize the phrase, deliver you up. In the original language, this implies a formal, legal handover. This is not a mob action in the streets. This is an arrest. This is a trial. This is a sentence. This is an execution. The 5 prophets warned that the system will use the impending darkness as a justification for the removal of the non-compliant. They will claim that your refusal to take the mark or your refusal to bow to the new protocols is the very reason for the global catastrophe. And here is the detail that should alarm every person watching this. Hated of all nations. The 5 prophets saw that there is no geographical refuge left. There is no neutral territory. The system is global, and therefore the hatred is global. The scanners at the borders, the surveillance in the skies, and the digital tracking in your hand will ensure that there is no wilderness. The system cannot monitor. The prophets saw that the execution is not a secret. It is a broadcast. It is designed to break the will of those who are still holding out. Revelation 24 specifies the method. Beheaded for the witness of Jesus and for the word of God. Why this method? Because it is an institutional process. It is a system designed to demonstrate total control over the physical life of the subject. But the 5 prophets warned of a secret inversion that the system cannot see. They saw that while the system kills the body, it cannot kill the future. The martyrs do not lose, they win. The system kills their breath, but it secures their throne. The prophets saw that as the darkness approaches, the refusers will be treated as the enemies of humanity. You will be blamed for the sun darkening. You will be blamed for the stars falling. You will be hated not for what you have done, but for whose name you carry. And here is the strategy for this moment. Do not look for an escape route in the physical world. There are no safe borders. The only refuge is spiritual. The only defense is a decision already made in the light. Warning number 2 is the warning of total systemic exclusion. You will be cut off from the economy, cut off from the legal system, and cut off from the protection of the state. The system's power is the threat of death. Comply or dies. But the 5 prophets saw a group of people who broke the system's leverage. They saw a group who loved not their lives unto the death. When the subject no longer fears the sentence, the system loses its deterrence. The execution becomes a coronation. But the institutional persecution is only the second warning. The third warning is the one that provides the actual survival blueprint for the 3-day period. Because the prophets did not just describe the danger, they described the response. And the response is a single, heavy word. Warning number 3. The prophets did not just describe the darkness, they provided the precise mechanism for surviving it. This is warning number 3. The survival instruction. It is a single word, 20 words in a single verse. And it contains the entire survival strategy for when the beast system activates and the 3 days of darkness settle upon the earth. Matthew 24:13 states, "But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved." Think about the weight of that word, endure. In the original Greek, the word is hupino. It does not mean to hide. It does not mean to flee to a bunker. It means to remain under. It means to bear up under extreme pressure. It means to stay in your position when every human instinct, every nerve in your body, and every voice in the world is screaming at you to move. 5 prophets warned that the strategy for the darkness is not political resistance. It is not a military uprising. It is not an attempt to overthrow the system through force. It is hupino. To endure is to stay under the weight. Imagine a structure being pressed down by an immense load. To endure is to be the pillar that refuses to buckle. The prophets saw that when the 3 days of darkness arrive, every pressure point will converge at once. The hunger will be real. The isolation will be total. Every digital scanner will be looking for your compliance. And every instinct will scream, "Comply," just to make the pressure stop. But the instruction is to bear the unbearable, to stay in position when every human calculation says, "Move." This is not a theological concept. It is a survival briefing. He that shall endure unto the end, not for a day, not for a week, not until the pressure eases, unto the end. The 5 prophets warned that there is no shortcut and no early exit from this period. The duration has been set by God, and the endurance must match the duration. It continues until the lightning. It continues until the trumpet. It continues until the gathering. The promise of being saved is linked directly to the act of holding your position, and here is why. The prophets frame the strategy as endurance rather than escape. This detail should change how you prepare tonight. Because the beast system is global. There is no nation to flee to. There is no border to cross where the system does not exist. There is no safe zone outside the reach of the digital eye. The geographic instructions given for specific locations in the past are not the strategy for the global darkness. The strategy for the world is spiritual. The mountains were the physical refuge for one era, but Christ is the spiritual refuge for this era. Endurance is the daily, moment-by-moment decision to remain in that refuge regardless of the cost. The prophets saw that the decision to endure is not made when the darkness starts. It is made while the lights are still on. It is the decision to remain under the authority of the Creator when the weight of the world tries to crush your faith. Warning number 3 is the call to spiritual stamina. The prophets warned that those who look for an easy way out will find themselves walking straight into the deception. The only way through the 3 days of darkness is through it. Bearing the pressure, outlasting the system, and staying under the weight until the King returns to lift it. But knowing the instruction to endure is only half the battle. The next part of the briefing reveals the specific traits of the people who actually succeed in doing it. Trait number 1, knowing the events and the warnings, is only the first layer of the briefing. 5 prophets warned that your ability to survive the 3 days of darkness depends on a quality you must possess before the first shadow falls. This is trait number 1. They loved the truth before the system began. Now, here is the detail that should hit every person watching this video with the force of a physical blow. Because this trait is not about how strong you are during the tribulation. It is not about your willpower during the 3 days of silence. It is about a decision being made right now, in this very moment, while the lights are still on. The prophets pointed to a terrifying reality found in 2 Thessalonians 2:10-12. And with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they received not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this cause, God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie. Read those words carefully. The people who are deceived by the false deliverers, the people who take the mark to buy bread, and the people who collapse into the beast system are not people who were simply tricked by a clever lie. They are people who rejected the truth when it was available for free. The 5 prophets warned that during this era, while the gospel is still preached, while the Bible is still accessible, while you can still watch a video like this without fear of arrest, you're making the decision that determines your endurance later. The deception during the 3 days of darkness is the direct consequence of a rejection made before the darkness. And here is the detail that should alarm you. The scripture says, God sends the strong delusion. Why? Because the delusion is judicial. It is a divine consequence for a world that had the truth in its hands and chose to scroll past it. The prophets saw millions of people who heard the warnings, felt the conviction in their hearts, and said, "Not tonight. Maybe after the move. Maybe after things settle down. Maybe after the kids go back to school." But the system activates before things settle down. Loving the truth is not just a theological preference. It is a spiritual vaccine. The prophets saw that those who survive the 3 days of darkness are those who have internalized the truth so deeply that a lie has nowhere to land. If you do not love the truth now, you will be powerless against the delusion then. The deception will wear a clerical collar. It will wear a press badge. It will wear the face of a trusted leader. And without the love of the truth already established in your soul, you will follow the false light straight into the void. This first trait is the foundation of all survival. You cannot improvise faith under the pressure of the beast system. You cannot manufacture the love of truth when you are starving. The prophet saw that the decision holds in the dark only because the decision was made in the light. This is the era of the open window. This is the moment where the cost is still abstract. But the prophets warned that the window is closing, and the strong delusion is already being prepared for those who refuse to walk through it. Trait number 1 is about the orientation of your heart. Do you love the truth even when it's uncomfortable? Even when it's unpopular? Even when it costs you your social standing? If the answer is no, then the prophets warned that you are already being prepared for the lie. But loving the truth is only the beginning. The second trait is what allows you to hold that truth when the world turns into a hunting ground. Trait number 2. Now we move to the second pillar of survival. 5 prophets warned that as the 3 days of darkness approach, the system's primary objective is to isolate you. This is trait number 2. They maintained community and refused to forsake the gathering. Now, listen closely, because this trait is what prevents the internal fracture we discussed earlier. The beast system operates on the principle of divide and conquer. It wants you alone. It wants you cut off from the body of believers. It wants you isolated in your fear, because an isolated believer is a vulnerable believer. The prophets pointed to a strategic instruction found in Hebrews 10:25, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more, as ye see the day approaching. Notice the phrase, so much the more. As the day of darkness approaches, your need for the community does not decrease, it intensifies. The 5 prophets warned that the beast system will make gathering illegal. It will close the buildings. It will lock the digital platforms. It will monitor the traditional meeting places. But the survivors, the ones who endure, are those who have already established a house church model. They learn to gather in ways that do not depend on buildings, budgets, or technology. The prophets saw that the believers who make it through the 3 days of darkness are those who have built bonds so strong that the threat of death cannot snap them. They have established underground networks of prayer and support. They know who to trust because they built that trust in the light before the shadows arrived. And here is the detail the system hates. Community is a weapon of resistance. When you gather, even in a whisper, even in a kitchen with closed doors, you are breaking the system's monopoly on truth. You are reminding each other of the Hupino instruction. You are sharing the bread that the mark cannot buy. You are strengthening the knees that are shaking. The 5 prophets saw that the elect do not face the darkness as individuals. They face it as a body. The system uses scanners to track transactions, but it cannot track the spiritual frequency of a community gathered in the name of the King. The prophets warned that those who try to go it alone in the 3 days of darkness are the first to fall to the strong delusion. Why? Because without the exhortation of brothers and sisters, the silence of the darkness becomes a megaphone for the enemy's lies. You need the voice of the community to remind you of the truth when your own mind is under attack. Trait number 2 is about the intentionality of your assembly. Are you building relationships now that can survive the stress of a global manhunt? Are you learning to pray with others in a way that doesn't require a screen? The prophets saw that the house church of the end times is the prototype for the kingdom. It is small, it is hidden, and it is indestructible. The system can take the building, but it cannot take the gathering. But maintaining the community is only the second trait. The third trait is the one that actually defeats the beast. It is the weapon that makes the system irrelevant. It is the quality that turns a victim into an overcomer. Trait number 3. Now, here is the trait that should give every person watching this a foundation of immovable courage. 5 prophets warned that while the beast system is the most sophisticated control mechanism in human history, it has a fatal flaw. It possesses no defense against a specific kind of weapon. This is trait number 3, the weapon of the overcomer. Revelation 12:11 defines this weapon with surgical precision. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto the death. Think about these 3 elements, 3 weapons, 3 traits, and each one is something the system can neither confiscate, nor scan, nor delete. First, the blood of the Lamb. This is not a physical object. It is your eternal standing. It is the finished work of the Creator that was secured 2,000 years before the digital scanner was even a blueprint. The 5 prophets warned that the beast system will control the economy. It will determine who buys, who sells, and who starves. But listen closely. The mark of the beast controls the economy, but it cannot control the atonement. The scanner at the distribution center can deny you bread, but it cannot deny you the blood of Christ. The system that determines your legal status on earth has zero jurisdiction over your redeemed status in heaven. The blood was shed in the light of day to protect you in the 3 days of darkness. It is a seal that no algorithm can override and no darkness can penetrate. Second, the word of their testimony. The 5 prophets saw that as the darkness approaches, the refusers do not stay silent. They speak. They tell others in whispers, in concealed gatherings, in kitchens with the doors locked, who the true king is. Every whispered testimony inside the beast system is a lethal act of war against the lie the system is built on. The system says there is no alternative. The testimony says there is a king. The system says compliance is survival. The testimony says faithfulness is eternal life. Every time you share the truth during the silence, you are creating a crack in the system's narrative. The surveillance can track your location, but it cannot track your faith. It can monitor your transactions, but it cannot monitor your prayers. The testimony is a weapon that turns a prison cell into a pulpit. Third, and most importantly, they loved not their lives unto the death. This is the ultimate inversion. This is the detail that causes the entire beast system to fracture and fail. Every system of total control in human history has operated on a single binary assumption: that the subject values physical survival above all else. Comply or die. The subject complies because the subject is afraid to stop breathing. But the 5 prophets saw a group of people who broke that assumption. They saw people who valued the truth more than their next meal. They valued the blood more than the bread the mark could buy. They valued the throne more than another day of breathing inside a system of lies. And when the subject no longer fears the threat of death, the system has no weapons left. The mark loses its leverage. The image loses its power. The execution loses its deterrence. The prophets warned that the system breaks not from an external army, but from internal irrelevance. It encounters a target it cannot intimidate. When you decide, right now, that your life is not your own, you become indestructible in the spirit. You are not a victim of the darkness. You are the one who outlasts it. Trait number 3 is about the death of fear. The 5 prophets saw that those who overcome are those who have already died to themselves before the system arrives. If you are not afraid to lose your life, the beast system has nothing to take from you. But while this trait makes you a conqueror, there is one final category we must cover. The 9 details are now assembled. The briefing is complete. We are moving into the final summary of what you must do tonight before the window closes. The final scene. We have arrived at the conclusion of the survival briefing. 5 prophets, 1 unified vision, and 9 precise details for life inside the beast system before the 3 days of darkness settle upon the earth. The briefing is now complete. The 9 details are in your hands. 3 events. What will happen? 1. The tribulation intensifies beyond anything in human history, but the days are shortened for the elect's sake. The system is not permanent. The boundary is set by God. 2. False Christs and false prophets multiply, performing real signs to exploit the desperation. Do not go forth. The true return looks like lightning, not a rumor in a desert. 3. The return comes, visible from east to west, accompanied by cosmic signs, ending the system permanently and gathering the faithful from the 4 winds. 3 warnings. What to resist. 1. Do not be deceived. The primary danger was repeated by the prophets because the deception wears a clerical collar, a press badge, and a familiar face. The standard is the word, not the authority of the speaker. 2. Persecution will be total, delivered up, killed, and hated by all nations. The cost is physical life, but the reward is a throne. 3. Endurance, hupino, is the strategy. Remain under the weight. Bear the pressure. Outlast the system. He that endures unto the end shall be saved. 3 traits. Who makes it through? 1. They loved the truth before the system began. They made the decision now, in this era, while the window was open. 2. They maintained community. They did not forsake the gathering. They built the house church model before the buildings were locked. 3. They held the testimony. They used the 3 weapons the system cannot defeat: the blood, the word, and the willingness to die. The beast system has not yet activated. The mark has not been fully implemented. The restrainer is still in place. The dam holds, but the infrastructure is being assembled right now. The covenant frameworks, the temple preparations, the economic control mechanisms, and the peace and safety language. The window is open, which means the truth can be loved now before the strong delusion arrives. The testimony can be established now before speaking costs your life. The decisions that determine your endurance during the 3 days of darkness are made before the darkness begins. Not during it, before it. They are made on a Tuesday night, in a bedroom, with a phone in your hand, while the truth is still free and the cost is still abstract. When the hunger arrives and the exclusion begins, the decision you made in the light will be the only thing that holds you in the dark. We return to the Mount of Olives. Jesus sitting with his disciples, the sun setting over Jerusalem. The answer to the question, "What shall be the sign of thy coming?" has been preserved for 2000 years for this specific generation. The briefing was given by the same person who will return like lightning to end the system. The warner and the rescuer are the same voice. The system is temporary. The mark is temporary. The 3 days of darkness are temporary. But the Lamb whose blood defeats the system, he is not temporary. Romans 10:9. That if thou shalt confess with thy mouth the Lord Jesus, and shalt believe in thine heart that God hath raised him from the dead, thou shalt be saved. The window is open. The briefing is in your hands, and the Lamb is still calling.